produce for us had become a game of unit economics. What's it going to cost? What can I sell it for? How much of that tiny margin am I going to be able to keep? And I lost sight of the fact that we were growing healthy, nutritious food that is really nourishing our communities. And when you get a chance to work in a fashion to where you're handing somebody a box and you get to see what that impact is on that person, it changed me.
Coming up, we are talking to a produce industry veteran and entrepreneur who is playing in the fresh produce distribution and regenerative ag space, who is kind of a freak entrepreneur. The Modern Acre podcast explores the latest in business, investing, technology, and sustainability in agriculture, and we're your hosts, Tyler and Tim Nuss. If you want to dig deeper with The Modern Acre, check out our membership community, The Modern Acre Co-op. The Modern Acre podcast is presented by American Ag Credit. American Ag Credit is a proud member of the Farm Credit System, which was created more than 100 years ago with the sole purpose of serving the financial needs of farmers and ranchers. From small farms to the largest agribusiness enterprises, American Ag Credit understands agriculture and how to structure customized financial solutions. Just like many of the guests we have on the pod, American Ag Credit recognizes that the evolution of agriculture is inevitable and exciting. Their goal is to be at the forefront of this evolution, partnering with producers to grow their future in ways they haven't imagined yet. To learn more about American Ag Credit and to receive exclusive access to reports from Terrain, a research and insight service of American Ag Credit, visit agloan.com/terrain or check the link in our show notes.
Ty, we were making it through the dog days of summer. We're only a month away from football, so we're getting close. So we're gonna save that detailed breakdown for a couple weeks from now. But happy to be plugging away almost to football season, Ty.
Tim, I'm on a media embargo talking Niners until Brandon Ayuk situation is resolved. So I'm not speaking of it. I'm ignoring it, and we will be back at a future date to discuss 49er football.
Oh, no, I made the mistake of watching Receivers on Netflix. We talked about the quarterback series last year, and 2 Niners are featured on it. So I couldn't help myself and got sucked back into football and getting all excited for the season.
I have to have a rehabilitation period where I'm just, completely withdrawn from football. So that's what I'm trying to focus on now.
Ty, I think we got to address this at the start of the interview. During the interview, you called the guest a freak. So that was kind of a unique situation for you. What happened there?
Yeah, I mean, you guys are going to love this because Steve is a business freak. I think, let's just call it as it is. I'm looking at his LinkedIn during the conversation. He's started a ton of businesses. I think his perspective on that, Tim, was really, really fascinating. This guy is just a innovator and a hustler. I don't know how else to put it. Like he finds opportunities. His main produce business, SunTerra, was on the brink of failing with COVID. And he had to really pull a rabbit out of his hat. And that story is incredible, Tim, how he's kind of built these adjacent peripheral businesses to kind of his main produce thing is just really inspiring. It's, what we love talking about is like building businesses, doing side projects that turn into full-time projects, right? Like that's what it's all about. And Steve, it was definitely really inspiring.
Yeah, Steve's a legend in the produce industry. If you work in fresh produce, you know who Steve is. Just very well respected in the space, and it's been awesome to see what he's been building the past couple of years with kind of these complementary businesses that are synergistic with what SunTerra is doing. So it was awesome to get to chat with him about his story. His latest company, Elevated Foods, is really doing some awesome stuff in the regenerative space. We're working with them as Nuss Farms this year on a couple projects, working to really test out different regenerative practices on farm this year, doing watermelons, peppers, cucumbers. So we got a lot of trials that are going on, and it's been awesome to partner with them on that project, which we get into as well. With that, let's jump in with what's top of mind for Steve.
A couple things that we're working on that I think are real top of mind. And obviously we'll be talking about some of the work we're doing at Elevated Foods as it relates to climate smart agriculture, or regenerative, sustainable, kind of fill in the buzzword here. I don't think we've really arrived at a definition of what that means. And it's great to be collaborating with growers to get there. And then secondly, a lot of the work we've been doing in, not only food insecurity and farm level, food rescue in terms of helping farmers harvest part of that crop that's left in the field and get it out to food banks and other organizations to get healthy food out into our communities and further our pivot into the healthcare field, where we're working together with healthcare plans to deliver prescriptive, fresh fruit and vegetable boxes, and the excitement around how fresh fruit and vegetable producers are beginning to have a seat at the table, as it relates to, healthcare challenges. So those would be two of the things that are really been a major part of our focus and are certainly top of mind.
Super interesting. We were chatting about this a couple of months ago, the whole food as medicine concept. You've been to a lot of conferences recently about that space. Before we jump into your background, maybe just talk to us about what's happening at a policy level with food as medicine. You mentioned prescription boxes. Are there doctors that are going to be recommending you eat apples and oranges? How's that going to play out?
Yeah. So, over the last, 5 or 10 years, there's been a real, kind of food as medicine movement out there. And only recently it's transitioned into the fresh fruit and vegetable industry, or at least, in our case it has. And there are several, programs through, these insurance companies, whether it's Medicare, whether it's Medicaid, whether it's private insurers, that are looking to improve the health of the people in our community that struggle with chronic health conditions, and how we can do that through food and nutritional services and nutritional coaching, and how we work together, with these healthcare plans to bring these solutions that really are important to combat the, rapid increase of healthcare costs across the spectrum. And I'm sure you see it in your own company. We certainly see it here. Our insurance rates never stay the same; they always go up, and that's a consequence of our healthcare system, which is broken in many ways. And so there's this burgeoning evidence coming out around, which is amazing, right? I mean, you are what you eat. We've heard that since we've grown up, but now there's building and mounting medical evidence around, these sorts of prescriptive fresh fruit and vegetables programs and produce prescriptions that can really have a significant impact, again, not only in the health of these folks, but in driving down healthcare costs.
I think it's so cool. I mean, I've personally been really fascinated, personally interested in health and fitness over the past decade. And really I think there's a lot more out there in terms of education now around how you can be putting the right things in your body and doing the right things for your body that is preventative, right? Versus, we've kind of grown up in this, slap prescription on you, right? If something is wrong from a medical perspective, it's, what medicines can we prescribe? It's a Band-Aid solution, right? Versus addressing the fundamental underlying issue that may be addressed with just lifestyle changes.
Yeah, we often hear that in calls, and I can't take credit for it because I heard it from other people, and it gets repeated often, which is we have a sick care system, not really a healthcare system, right? We have all sorts of interventions that help you when you're sick, but not a lot of focus on what happens before. And you mentioned about these food as medicine conferences. I've been attending probably a half a dozen over the last 6 or 8 months, and there might be ourselves and maybe one or two other agricultural interests there, right? And so there are many types of fresh fruit or many types of medically tailored meal or medically tailored interventions. Some revolve around, organizations we all know and love, like Meals on Wheels, maybe frozen meal providers. But really this opportunity that's been exciting for us is breaking it down to bringing, farm fresh fruits and vegetables in their whole form directly to people that are prescriptive to their specific needs. And so it's been interesting to see that, the healthcare system is recognizing the supply chain, and the supply chain shocks that we had not too long ago aren't quickly forgotten, and they understand the challenges of executing these types of programs. So again, being on the forefront of that's been an exciting ride.
Yeah, it's super cool. You're kind of pioneering the space for the industry, and excited to see where it goes. But let's take a step back, Steve, learn a little bit more about your background, what led you into food and agriculture.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so I'm from Brazeel, California. So it's in the southeastern tip of California, up against the Mexican border and the Arizona border. My father was a farm labor contractor and had several other agricultural businesses like fertilizer distribution and things like that. But really, when I was growing up, it was farm labor contracting, right? And so I grew up working in the fields alongside migrant farm workers. I really enjoyed it. I look back at that time because when you're a young person and you can put some money in your pocket, I think he paid me $4 an hour if I remember correctly. And but having money in your pocket in high school was a pretty cool thing, and really enjoyed those times. But I would see my dad leave at 3 a.m. to make sure everybody was there on time, and I would see him move the tractors at the end of the night to make sure they were ready for the next day. And those 18-hour days were something that my young self wasn't interested in really doing. And so I knew I wanted to be in fresh produce. And there was one time I was out in the field and I saw a red 928 Porsche come pulling into the field with a cloud of dust behind it. And I asked my dad who that was, and he made some sort of disparaging comment about that it was a salesperson, that all they do is come out to the field and kick a few melons around, then play golf and drink all afternoon and make $100,000 a year. And he goes, we do the real work out here. Meanwhile, my 12-year-old brain was going, I want to be the guy. That sounds way easier than this work out here. But I went off to school at the University of Arizona and studied agriculture, and knowing I was going to get into sales, and so fortunate to land at Sun World International at the time, was a tremendous innovator in produce, I think the industry's leading company in the 80s and 90s. And now they're very successful as a provider of genetics for table grapes and just a great company. So I learned the basics there. I worked for the Damari Company, another fantastic multi-generational family company. And it gave me the foundation to want to go out on my own and form SunTerra in September of 2000. A little break in between there. I knew I wanted to go out on my own, but I had this opportunity to join a company called buyproduce.com. So I was part of the first .com craze in the fall of '99. Several companies were competing for the space, the business-to-business internet company. So that kind of allowed me to transition, away from the companies I was working with and eventually start SunTerra Produce. And at SunTerra, we work with, smaller multi-generational family farms, and then, bring their volume together and market it to, retailers and wholesalers and food service distributors.
I want to hold on this whole broker sales guy conversation. Definitely resonates. Our dad, has made the disparaging comments based on what car shows up. If it's not a white pickup truck, then some comment is made. Steve, like, it's kind of this interesting dichotomy, right? Where you see the guy who's making a 6-figure salary hotshot, but you also talk about kind of a produce broker business isn't necessarily like, it's not the first thing that someone calls out as the best business, high margin business, right? It's right. A lower margin business. Can you kind of speak to that? Like, is this a fundamental, getting this thing, you started it yourself off the ground? I mean, this is a volume game. Is that accurate? Like, can you kind of speak to the economics of the space?
Yeah, the economics, we're what we call a grower, packer, shipper, and we're small and we're regional. But a lot of the things that I didn't understand about the business is you don't just roll up when the crop's ready to get harvested and sell it, collect the money and give the grower back what's left and take a percentage, and the cash flow works in your favor. What I quickly realized is growers are very smart and they want investment and they want you to have skin in the game. So I quickly realized I needed to bring capital to the table first and foremost, and that in addition to sales skills. So I'd often tell people we're really a finance company, but we also sell produce on the side, because that's what it really became. We pay all the harvest costs, we pay the cartons, we pay the cooling, we pay the freight, all those extra things. But to your point, it is a 100% volume game, and you can have significant top line sales, and it really is zero relation to your profitability. I mean, for us, and maybe because we're not as sharp and efficient as other companies, but it's a low single digit business. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And so you need to ring up $100 million in sales to put a few dollars in your pocket, or whatever the case might be. And that's what the scary territory the industry's heading is. If you're not 500 million plus, I don't know what place there is for you in this industry going forward if we don't get support from retailers and large retailers and large food service distributors who announce and claim that they want to support small farmers, but create such tremendous hurdles for small farmers to be able to sell into those channels.
It's so fascinating, right? Because I feel like it's great hearing this perspective, because in ag, in farming, there's always this farmers feel like they're getting the short end of the stick. They're doing the hard part, and they see a price at retail and they're doing the math in their head, right? Of, I'm doing the hard part growing this, and I know what I get paid, and then I'm seeing this price at retail. And I think it's important to have a comprehensive, holistic view of the supply chain. And you're even mentioning it, right? Like the business is single digit profit, right? And not only that, you called out, you're having to front capital too. So it's this interesting thing. And I think there's just questions of, where is this money going? How can it be more efficient so that maybe there's more money put in farmers' pockets, but more money put in pockets of everyone in the supply chain? So it's kind of just this interesting dynamic, and great to hear, I think, your perspective on it.
Right. And I think, you have to love the industry because, and I don't know if your farm goes into it looking at this the same way we do, but every and I just had an artichoke deal come across my phone, and I have to do the math on that and look to see what that's going to look like. But you know what my first reaction was when I saw it? I said, what price would we have to sell it for to where we don't lose any money? And so that's if your business model is don't lose money, try to break even and see if we might be able to, squeeze a little bit here and there. That's a difficult business model. And that's where my mind goes, right? Okay, what's the yield? I just said I need cost per acre, yield per acre, and then break even price, and then run the reports to see if we can even get there. And that creates long-term challenges for resiliency of farmers when their goal is we're going to head into this year and let's hope we don't lose any money.
Totally. I've worked in produce for over a decade and found those same challenges where it becomes just this crazy volume game of you're having to sharpen the pencil, and it's if I do 10 loads and take a haircut on margin, then it might pencil out, and it just kind of becomes this really challenging system to get out of. So excited to kind of chat about the different areas that you've spun off the back of SunTerra Produce with Project FoodBox and Elevated, and kind of how you're looking to address some of these challenges within the food system. So maybe talk us through the COVID period for SunTerra and when things really got rolling with Project FoodBox.
Leading into the pandemic, we were leaking oil as a company pretty good. Things weren't great. We were coming off a few difficult seasons, and as is typical in the produce industry, you just need to stick around, and markets usually will take you out. We'll pull you out over a matter of time. And, the markets were starting to perk up, and we were looking like we were going to have a strong finish in February and March of 20 to kind of pull us out of the hole. Similar, lose money the first 2 months of the season and bring it all back at the end of the last 2 months, right? And right when that was happening, that's when COVID hit and the shutdowns began, and really despair, sat in our company. Wow, what are we going to do? 70% of the crops we grow are destined for food service markets. So, schools and restaurants and hotels and travel. So, consequently, we were disking up, 70% of our production, as were many other neighbors. It wasn't limited to SunTerra. As we were deciding what we were going to do during those very quiet times when nobody knew what was going on, the USDA came up with this program called the Farmers to Families FoodBox program. And that program aimed to have USDA contract with distributors like SunTerra, and for those distributors to go out into the community and go out into the farming community and purchase items from farmers whose markets were decimated due to the pandemic, pay them a good price, and then package those up in awesome variety boxes and deliver those to food banks, faith-based organizations, community-based organizations, all on behalf of the USDA. So this program, I contacted my good friend A.G. Kawamura, who's former Secretary of Ag of California under Governor Schwarzenegger, and because I knew he had connections with nonprofits and I knew he had connections with food banks, and embarrassingly, I did not have those connections and didn't know where to begin. But part of the process was you had to contract and connect with those nonprofits so that you had a distribution point and a distribution channel. And he introduced me to a few folks who really kind of changed my perception of what fresh food was all about, when I started realizing how critical it was in some of these underserved communities. And we began forming relationships. We had 1 week to formulate a proposal and send it to USDA. Fortunately, we were selected as one of the awardees to bring food to vulnerable communities on the West Coast, and we began working on it. So it saved our company, it saved our workers, it allowed us to keep our facility open, it allowed us to harvest at least some of the items that we had, it allowed us to buy from all the neighboring farms and support them, and eventually get 1.5 million boxes over the course of that year out into the community to such faraway places as the Navajo Nation, 8 or 10 different states along the West Coast. And so when that program ended after 1 year, it was a pandemic response. The food banks came to us and we came to them and they said, we love this program. One of the food bank executives put it eloquently by saying, you're bringing us front of life produce. We're used to getting end of life produce. And how do we keep this going? And so we were able to forge a partnership with them to continue with that work. And now that food bank work consists of us working with growers, identifying the sizes, grades of produce that the market doesn't want, and providing revenue for farmers on those items, and then routing those awesome farm fresh fruits and vegetables to food banks, along the West Coast. And I'm proud to say that, since the pandemic ended, that initial period ended, we've delivered twice as many boxes as we did even during the pandemic. So it is a phenomenal example of public-private partnership and how things can move on void of USDA funding and really kind of stand up on their own 2 feet and move that way forward. And then that's what, kind of led us into the food as medicine field as we exhibited our ability to, create these boxes and deliver them directly to people's doorsteps. That kind of skill that we developed enabled us to kind of break into the healthcare field. Along that same time, as we were building out our FoodBox programs and really, thinking differently about fresh fruits and vegetables in the sense that, like we were talking earlier, produce for us had become a game of unit economics. What's it going to cost? What can I sell it for? How much of that tiny margin am I going to be able to keep? And I lost sight of the fact that we were growing healthy and nutritious food that is really nourishing our communities. And when you get a chance to work in a fashion to where you're handing somebody a box and you get to see what that impact is on that person, it changed me in the sense that, let me know like what the importance of what we're doing and why we should be doing it. And then so all along that effort, in 2020, we didn't know where the FoodBox program was going, obviously, but we had started a company called Elevated Foods. And what Elevated Foods was started for was to really work with growers, kind of mid-sized growers of our size, probably similar to yours, and work together to strengthen those growers, to aggregate them in a way that we could present some sort of shared services model across all those growers for them to utilize all the tools that are necessary to sell to a retailer these days, and whether that's around labor transparency, whether that's around packaging, whether that's around sustainable and regenerative practices, whether that's around pollinator habitat, all these different challenges that we have now that we didn't have 5-10 years ago, and how that's impacting smaller growers and actually shrinking the available growers that have the ability to sell into retail outlets, which furthers consolidation. And then we have massive producers and those small family farms. And so we created this company, and we went out and raised an initial seed round, if you will, from friends and family to get the company off the ground. And about 6 months in, we were starting to get some traction, and kind of, it wasn't our number one focus because Project FoodBox was and is, but we'd heard about this grant program from USDA called the Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities. And when we learned about the 3 pillars of that grant opportunity, which were A, to identify and incentivize growers to adopt climate smart practices, B, to provide measurement tools so that we can find out which of the practices we are doing are providing a positive impact and which ones aren't. And then thirdly, which we thought the most important, was how to help growers either create new markets and, through some of the innovative new channels, like maybe food bank channels or food as medicine channels, but also to help growers achieve a premium for the products that they grow, similar to how organic products achieve in the marketplace. So when we heard about this opportunity, we're like, wow, it was almost like we were in the room when they wrote the grant, because it was in direct, correlation and alignment with our vision for Elevated Foods. And so we put our heads down and worked for several months on a proposal and sent it in. And we're fortunate enough to be chosen as an award winner, a $20 million grant award to go out and work with farmers and provide incentives to them and really demystify what climate smart agriculture is, right? When you go to a farmer and mention climate and this, that, and the other, the eyes start rolling and they don't really know what you're talking about, and they get defensive and all the rest of this stuff. So it's really, kind of taking the USDA language, if you will, and kind of distilling it into a way that all of us as agricultural people can understand, not upending operations, but really trying to be complementary instead of changing the whole game, if you will. And, finding out that the growers that we're talking to are doing a lot of these things that USDA considers climate smart, but growers collectively, we don't do a good job of showcasing what we're doing or pounding our chest about what we do, right? So it was a tremendous opportunity for us to kind of launch Elevated. So we're in that process now. Subsequent to that, we were awarded an additional grant from the National Resource Conservation Center, NRCS, for their RCPP grant. So we'll be working with growers in California to install more efficient irrigation systems. And so that was a $12 million award that we're actually going to be able to help growers with capital purchases to transition to drip systems, to utilize more efficient sprinkler heads, to utilize different types of maybe drip tape or technologies that growers want to adopt, save for the the cost that it takes to do that. So when we started this company, we had no idea that there would ever be a program that would be supportive of that from USDA. But when those opportunities came, it was kind of like it just happened to fit right at the right place at the right time. And, with Elevated, we get a chance to go out and work with all these farmers that we know and respect. And I'm just blown away by what I see out in the field. I see things differently than I used to see them before. I would just go look at the field and look at the fruit and stuff. And now I kind of notice more because I'm trying to absorb more and trying to figure out, what everybody's doing. And I walk away just amazed by, the strength of our fresh fruit and vegetable growers and the supply chain that we have.
Okay, I've got some questions. First of all, it kind of seems like you're a bit of a freak, Steve. I'm looking at your LinkedIn, and I would say confused / impressed. So I want to zoom out for a second, right? Like you've spun out, it looks like, several businesses out of or in partnership with SunTerra in some capacity. Then you have this crazy story about COVID and spinning out Project FoodBox, and now Elevated to a ton of success. I don't know what my question is. I guess my question is like, what's your vision? How have you been iterating on the business? Like, it seems like you find areas of, hey, this is a business spinoff. Like, question one is, do you have a philosophy around kind of these spinoffs, for lack of a better word? And two, how do you do it? How do you manage all of these businesses? Are you delegating to GMs? What does that look like?
Yeah, well, two different things. I think maybe I learned this from my dad, but when I would look at, and I'd get with my accountant and say, who are we making the biggest payables to? And then I found out there were 2 or 3 truck brokers that we were paying $5 or $10 million a year to deliver to all of our customers. And I said, why don't we just become the truck broker? And I'd rather write myself a check for $5 or $10 million than to somebody else to do the same job better. And that's how we kind of started with that. And then I was able to find amazing partners in Dallas, Texas. That was just a kind of an opportunity that popped up to partner with somebody there and become a wholesale distributor. And as a grower, we always want to know what a wholesale distributor is up to, right? And what they're doing and kind of like how that business works and what margins are necessary there. And that really helps inform me on what to do on the growing side, knowing the challenges that a wholesale distributor has. But really, and so I kind of look at opportunities that way. When I think about the FoodBox program, not to sound kind of weird about it or spiritual about it, but it's almost like it was our team collectively came together during that difficult time when we didn't know what our future was, and all came together to try to put together this proposal that would be chosen because we thought this could save our company. And when it works and when you get it, then you start getting this momentum and people start coming into your life. And when you're doing things that are helping people and actually like providing these foods into the community, all this kind of opportunities seem to pop up. And I like to think of it, when we talk about the medically tailored meal program, they asked, if we had the ability to do registered dietitian nutritional assessments. And we said yes, because farmers and produce people, we just keep saying yes until, just see what happens. And then, but I didn't really know what that was. And so I was having a conversation with one of our longtime growers and I said, man, I need to find some RDNs if I'm going to pull this off. I don't even know where to begin. And he goes, I have 3 daughters and they're all RDNs, or 3 of my daughters are RDNs. He has 4 daughters, I believe. And then when we needed a final mile distributor, when we were trying to figure out like, how are we going to deliver these boxes directly to members' doorsteps like Amazon does? Do we go to USPS? Do we go to FedEx? Do we go to the Postal Service? And then through a friendly connection that I made through the pandemic, we identified a company that was decoupling from Amazon and had extra capacity and was looking for a partner and was mission oriented. And it was just like, wow, this person just popped up into our life, right? So a lot of these opportunities are just positioning ourselves, putting ourselves in the right place. And then people that are more talented than me come along and really kind of help take that idea and execute it. And I think that's probably the most exciting part too about the medically tailored meal program is that we get a chance to do stuff. We're not selling the technology. We're not selling air. We're actually providing an item and a product, and there's operations behind it. And it really fits us.
Impressive stuff, Steve. I've heard your story a couple of times, but it's always awesome to walk back through it of just everything that's happened along the way has just been so awesome to see, and excited to talk a little bit more about Elevated and kind of what you're currently doing in that space. Like, we've been fortunate to partner with Elevated on behalf of Nuss Farms, doing some really innovative trials this year on watermelons, peppers, cucumbers, a lot of different crops that we're super excited about. So maybe just talk to us about like what the value prop is for growers, like how they engage with Elevated, and then kind of like post grant, like what the go forward business model looks like. You talked about kind of creating new markets for growers, like post grant money. What is the monetization business model for Elevated to kind of facilitate this work going forward?
So I think one of the biggest benefits of this program is really to introduce what climate smart agriculture is to growers and to get that messaging out. We've developed a really strong relationship with USDA. Undersecretary Robert Bonney has been a great asset, and his team there in terms of really kind of letting us know that it's okay to fail. Like, the goal is to try a bunch of stuff and knowing that some of those are going to fail so that we can eliminate those and focus on things that actually work for farmers. And I was super impressed with their ability to say, this is a farmer-led program. This isn't a prescriptive program where we're here to say, you need to do X, Y, and Z to qualify for this grant opportunity. It's let's open up your operation. Let's see what you're doing. Tell us what your challenges are. And then let's see what applicable tools there are that fit within the Climate Smart toolbox. And so this opportunity to kind of, and when we talk to growers, and maybe Tim, it was similar with you. I don't remember our call specifically, but you kind of see this, over the hour-long call. First, they're kind of, sitting back in their chair or just kind of wondering like what this is all about. And then when we start talking to farmers in farmer language and say, hey, no, what are the things that you're looking for? How can we help you? What are the tools that you need? What are the technologies that you really want to try? But since our margins are so thin, you don't have the money to just try it just to see if it works. And then let's utilize this incentive funding to go out and do those types of things. And so we found that the growers have already identified several technologies that they like. They're doing a lot of practices that the USDA is looking for, and they're starving for new ones. And really, every single grower that we've talked to, we've enrolled into the program. My thought coming in was that there would be, I don't want to say pushback, but just concern and a slow adoption, but it's been quite the opposite. People are really rushing towards this because as a grower community, me included, when someone asks if my operation's regenerative, sustainable, I'm like, sustainable and how? Financially or like, what are we talking? Like, and so, and we just get inundated with these questions as growers. And so what I love about this program is the fact that we get to work with growers and have them tell us what they need, and then we're there to support it. As it relates to a go-forward model, our business model is, some sort of a licensing agreement or some kind of royalty agreement around the Elevated brand in this cohort of growers that we're looking to create. But really, this grant funding has enabled us to really kind of pause in the sense of not having to, I guess it's okay to not know what it's going to be, right? I didn't think that was the case when you're out pitching, and I'm sure you guys have done this, you always think that you have to have an A, B, C, a final chapter, and this is what's going to happen. And that's the difficulty of fundraising. In this particular environment, we get the ability to learn over the next 2 years what the challenges really are with the growers, what the retailers want and need, how we can help both sides come together so that retailers can purchase from growers that like our companies, and how we do that. And then as a go forward model, I think it'll reveal itself, much like, Project FoodBox has. It's just the one thing that really gets me excited about it is as we build out this cohort of elevated items, and then utilizing that group of growers as the ingredients for the food as medicine box, and really creating this soil to doorstep solution that is, truly end to end, and tying together soil health with human health, and really starting to and interested in working on like, what evidence can we show? Can we show that products grown in a climate smart fashion have a higher nutrient density? There's a lot of studies that suggest that. And if that's the case, why wouldn't we want to use the food is medicine? Why wouldn't we want to use these supercharged fresh fruit and vegetables in the boxes that we provide medicine for, right? So I think there's a point where these missions collide and kind of, come together in a certain way, because it's really about the food system in general and how it can, contribute to the human health.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, you have the benefit of, this grant to figure that out. And I think that's really unique and special and an opportunity. But I think your point is spot on of really, if you can demonstrate value the market will pay for that value. And so the most important thing is, are you providing value? And if so, you can figure out the business model, right? And I think that's kind of where you guys are at with it.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And that's exactly the way we've looked at it. And we'll start looking around, as the months progress and years going forward, we'll start looking around to really see where those opportunities are. It's really interesting. Last year at the IFPA, I met with the largest food bank purchasing organization in the U.S., and I met separately with one of the larger retailers in the U.S., and we were just having general conversations. And then for whatever reason, I asked each one of them, separately what their biggest challenge was. And I was shocked that the food banks and the major retailer had the same answer, which was sourcing from small farmers. And I said, well, partially it's because they're a dying breed and they don't exist anymore because they get put out of business. But really what the retailers had told me is, because of all these new requirements that are pushed down on growers as it relates to new audit schemes and all these different types of costs that get added onto the grower, they inadvertently shrunk their vendor base, and all that's left are the big, massive suppliers that can afford to, invest in all these different things that retailers need. And so it's kind of had the adverse effect of working with these smaller growers. So we also see an opportunity, as a potential future business model to work with tons of small growers, aggregate their volume, and then be able to, by utilizing the elevated platform, meet the requirements of a major retailer and allow for, the opportunity for major retailers to really step up and, stand behind what they say, which is that they want to support local food systems and local family growers. And I think that's a way that we can get there.
Super excited about what you're up to, Steve. I think you're very well positioned, given your background in produce and food distribution, to be able to solve some of these challenges and kind of fight against consolidation that's happening within the industry and really find alternative approaches to market for small and medium-sized growers. So we'll end with a fun one. Steve, what's your food or ag hot take?
I think we're at a very unique place in time because of the recent supply chain challenges, again, that we discussed that we've had over the last number of years, and that the highlight is on how resilient the fresh fruit and vegetable supply chain is. And now how we see that the items that we grow and produce can literally be prescribed as medicine. And I think about my business associates or people that I know in my life and the businesses that they're in, and I can't think of one of them that are in a business that the products that they grow increase the health of the people on the planet. So, I think we've been kind of I wouldn't say forgotten, I would say invisible member of the supply chain. People just assume those apples and those melons are going to be on the shelf every single day. But I think there's more appreciation for that now. And then which provides a greater opportunity for us as an industry to showcase our strength and the diversity of our supply and varieties and regionality and et cetera. So I think it's a fantastic time to be in the produce business.
Steve, how can listeners get in touch and connect with you, everything you're working on, and Elevated?
Yeah, they can find all of our information at SunTerraProduce.com, elevatedfoods.com, or projectfoodbox.org. And they can find all the information they need, or find me on LinkedIn like you did and get confused by my bio.
So, Tim, what'd you think?
Some of the stories he's told, I've heard before, having met him numerous times, but it's always awesome to hear his story. And I think something that stands out for me is just his ability and his mindset to say yes to stuff. Of if he doesn't totally understand how to solve a problem, just say yes and figure it out on the fly. I think just having that kind of growth mindset and pushing through adversity is super admirable.
Love it. Well, guys, hope you enjoyed that one with Steve. Be sure to check out his businesses. We'll link everything in the show notes. And we will be back on Friday with a fresh edition of our Topsoil series with Ariel Patton.